Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Anomalies, a show that's about things that we don't always understand, but we always find fascinating and we want to look into and learn more. I believe this is our 102nd edition or interview with Anomalies. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Gwen Farrell. I'm a co-host, and I'm being joined today by my co-host, Dave Jinks. How are you doing, Dave?
I am well, Gwen. Hope you're well. And JoAnn is going to be a very interesting guest here. And I can't wait till you run down her extensive list of qualifications and experience. Might
Right.
take a bit here, so we should get started on that, I think.
Let's do that. So our guest today is JoAnn Donaldson, and I will take just a couple of minutes to give you an idea of all the exciting and remarkable things that she has been involved in her life. So here we go. Okay. JoAnn has degrees in electrical engineering from the University of Houston and biomedical engineering from the University of Texas Health, Houston. After high school, she enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, and she did 2 tours of duty flying combat missions over Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. During her time in combat, she earned 3 Purple Hearts for wounds suffered in combat, and the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is afforded to someone who has distinguished themselves by single acts of heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. And she has 3 patents. In 1971, she joined the NASA Johnson Space Center and became part of the pre-flight and recovery team medical for Apollo 16 and 17, Skylab, and shuttle landings, among others. She was involved in a UFO incident on the Apollo 17 moon mission that NASA did not make public. So we're hoping maybe we can hear a little information about that from her today. She was also involved in investigating the well-known Cash-Landrum incident. And after NASA, she worked installing advanced computer systems for jet engine power plants. And many years later, she worked at the DEA crime lab. After retiring from the DEA, JoAnn attended culinary school, and she is currently a private chef, which is really fascinating. She has done many, many interviews and appeared on Ancient Aliens, seasons 13, 15, and other shows. JoAnn Donaldson, thank you for your service to our country and welcome to Anomalies.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Dave, I know you've got a lot of questions. You want to get us started?
Oh boy. Oh, well, JoAnn, you've pretty much been here since the beginning. I mean, the beginning of the space, what we call the modern space age. I mean, really 1969 obviously is where it's in the most in the public consciousness with the moon landing. When, let's see, you were at Johnson in 71, what were you doing prior to that? When, Apollo 10.
I was U.S. Air Force before that.
So you were in the Air Force at that time.
Yeah. The NASA job was my first real civilian job after I left the Air Force. And it was a total shock when after I interviewed and on my first day on the job was when I found out that I was going to be on the pre-flight and recovery team and working with the astronauts on a daily basis, helping develop different types of medical experiments and stuff. And as a 25-year-old, that it has to be a dream job right there.
Yeah.
Wow. So Gwen, I know, wants to talk about the Apollo 17 incident, and we all want to hear about that because that was a personal experience. However, I think there's so much before 17 because Apollo 17 was the last mission. 71, was that 71?
72.
72 was Apollo, yeah, 17. Uh, can you were around and potentially thinking about NASA during Apollo 1. Well, we call it Apollo 1. It was called something different inside the agency. The Apollo 1 fire, which is, I've done a lot of research on that, and I hope to publish some information about that. So I'm very curious about Apollo 1. You rarely hear about that. And it was a fire that almost single-handedly destroyed the space agency effort in the first place. I mean, NASA was really kind of hanging by a thread at that point after that tragedy. Can you tell us and the audience a little bit about what you know regarding the Apollo 1 fire?
I really don't really know too much about it. I was in the Air Force when that happened, and I was overseas, so we didn't really get a lot of news from back home. But we did hear about the fire. We did hear about the death of the three crewmen. Other than that, I really don't have a lot of insight
Okay,
because it was not really talked about, and after, by the time I got on board with NASA, it was not really talked about among the crews and stuff.
Okay, and why do you think that is the case? Was it just because go forward at any cost, kind of get better and improve, or do you feel like there was some sort of intentional suppression of that information?
I don't really think there was any kind of suppression of the information. By the time Apollo 11 came around and we had the moon landing, we had a whole, in my field of view, a whole paradigm shift right there. We have landed 2 people on the moon. Everything that came up that was before that was just led up to that particular moment. And then from that point on, we went forward, faster and forward afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the turnaround from 1967, the utter tragedy that had to really send a chill throughout the entire organization, to a mere 2 years later when we're stepping onto the moon, that must have been a real whirlwind and a sight to behold from an insider's view. I can't even imagine how exciting that must have been for you and everybody participating. So we stopped going in 1972. Now I'm going to jump to the end here, and we can go back to the beginning still, but we can jump all over the timeline. But 1972 is when we stopped going. Can you tell me what your feeling was in 72 after Apollo 17? Did you think that it would linearly keep going, that we'd go back to the moon, that we'd go to Mars, that we'd send men or women to Mars? I mean, what was the sentiment at the end of that epic voyage to, Apollo 17?
For those of us on Apollo, excuse me, on Apollo 17, it was very frustrating. We had the hardware for Apollo 18, 19, 20. It was already built. It was ready to go. And it was, and then the program was pulled from, you might say the rug was pulled from beneath of us. And so there was a lot of frustration, a lot of animosity towards the White House, not so much Congress, the White House. And it was just very, very frustrating. The one saving grace was Apollo 17. That was a true scientific mission. And the reason for that was that Harrison Smith was not a an old combat pilot or test pilot. He was a pure scientist.
Mm.
He was a geologist, and it was the first real scientific mission conducted on the moon.
Hmm. And then it kind of felt like the rug was pulled out at that point. Do you think it was a matter of funding? Did the American public just get tired of it in terms of what the
No,
government
it
bureaucrats
was.
thought, or what happened, do you think?
There's been many rumors. The best one I think of is that the funding was stopped. The funding for 18, 19, 20 was stopped so that the funding could go in to the Vietnam War.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll let Gwen jump in here because I know she has a particular interest in the
18,
incidents in the
17, yeah.
Vietnam War and what you might have witnessed and other people had witnessed. So I'll turn it over to Gwen. I've got plenty more though, Gwen. So
Okay,
save me a
yeah,
little time at the end.
definitely want to talk about Apollo 17 before we get done today. Maybe you can take that, David. But
Oh yeah.
yes, I do. JoAnn, I've had a long time interest in UFOs, in wars and times of military conflict on Earth, and specifically the Vietnam conflict. I didn't serve there, but that was our war. I'm of the age that was our war. And there was so much going on, and it was so different from previous conflicts that it has just always stuck somewhere in me. And I keep saying I'm going to do something about it. I never have, but I am so happy to have you here to talk with you and run some of my thoughts by you, see as someone who participated, what knowledge you have or information you might be able to give us. I'm sure that you are familiar with the many reports of UFOs and anomalous events that took place during the Vietnam conflict. Among others, there was a 1966 event at Nha Trang, which you're probably familiar with, a 1968 attack on a team of Soviet engineers up in North Vietnam, patrol boats that were fired on and destroyed, the reported Black Virgin Mountain recovery of alien technology, and even underwater UFOs that were in the 1970s, which I think maybe some people don't really realize there were USOs going on there too. Interestingly, General George S. Brown, who was Air Force Chief of the State at the time, in a press conference, he said that in Vietnam, UFOs were officially referred to as enemy helicopters. They were not referred to as UFOs. This is one of the things that has always been so fascinating to me about how this was handled. So if I can ask you, what's your opinion and what knowledge can you share with us about the many reports that have happened? I don't mean to discuss them all, but will you have a general feeling for them? And did you ever have personally an experience when you were in Southeast Asia serving in the military with UFOs?
Let me start off to say, and I can say this now because the Air Force outfit I was in Vietnam was a very top secret outfit. It was part of the 6994th Group, SS. And you can kind of look up the 6994th SS and you'll get the background of that. We were segregated from the rest of the base. We were not allowed to mingle with the rest of the base because of the missions that we were doing. And some of these missions did involve some of these cases that you're talking about. And it was, again, after getting out of the Air Force, frustrating that I was still required to stay silent about these incidents until 2009, when they decided to declassify everything that the 6994th SS was involved in. Now, you will not find everything on the archives for the 6994th SS. But we were primarily involved in aerial and ground surveillance and North Vietnamese and Viet Cong activity. But we also were called in whenever some unit started screaming on the radios that they were being attacked, but it's not, and they're saying, we're getting attacked, but it's not Charlie. It's not Charlie. And which was the code name for the North Vietnamese at the time, Charlie. So that's when we would get involved, because it was like, okay, we got another black helicopter event going on. We need to go out and interview these people, get whatever evidence we can, and then have these people immediately sign another secrecy act saying they will shut up and not talk. And that was mentality back then of that type of affair.
Did you feel that these UFOs, or so-called enemy helicopters, really were extraterrestrial or interdimensional or something? Or what was your feeling? What did you think when you were having to listen to these people give their testimonies? And
well, we really thought it was advanced Russian technology. Because that's where, not, excuse me. That's where the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong was getting their primary their weapons and stuff. And we thought, every time we went out, first thought was, okay, what kind of technology, Russian technology, are we looking at? Yeah. But the thing is that we never could really find any evidence of advanced Russian technology. But the thing, so, and at the time, it was like, UFOs were taboo, you in the military. And so, you didn't go to the second choice.
Yeah. So, did you ever think that it could have been advanced American technology that you were seeing?
We were pretty familiar with most of the advanced American technology at the time. So, and yes, we looked at that, but from the reports and testimonies, we ended up having to rule that out too.
Oh, interesting, very interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of information that is available to people who want to look at it, books and a lot on the internet, but I've seen so much of it, I'm not always sure how valid it is, how real it is. So it's really a pleasure to speak with someone here who's been through it, and it's good to know that. So, okay, David. You're up next.
Well, let me go back to 1969. There are some reports from Stephen Greer. Our audience will know who Stephen Greer is from his disclosure, and it looks like JoAnn is familiar with that body of evidence. The Disclosure Project witnesses, there are a couple in particular, Donna Hare and then Sergeant Carl Wolf, who was also an Air Force guy. Unfortunately, both passed away. I just found out today, recently in the last few years. I guess I should ask JoAnn, are you familiar with either of them, those names?
I'm familiar with the names from, over time,
Mm-hmm.
from then to now. Um, and it's, but, other than what I have read,
Mm-hmm.
you
didn't know
from
them
their
personally or
testimonies
anything
and
like
stuff.
that. Yeah, I mean
I never met them. I
it
never
seems
met
like
them in person.
sorry, yeah, it seems like it'd be unlikely. There were so many thousands of people involved at the efforts at that time. But for listeners who might not remember or might not have heard of those particular witnesses, Carl Wolf said that he saw structures on the dark side of the moon, I believe, very obvious, a base on the, I don't know if it was an alien base or our base or whatever, but he reported and he maintained that for many years that he saw that. And then Donna Hare, I think, is a very interesting story. She was one of the so-called strippers. That's what they called themselves. Their job was to airbrush out undesirable things. I think the phrase was things that would confuse the American public if they saw them in Apollo imagery. And she used to work for Ford Aerospace, which went through several name changes. I can't remember the other ones, but Ford Aerospace. JoAnn, can you speak to that idea that even as early as Apollo 10 or before, that NASA regularly employed people to edit or what's the word, sanitize imagery for some reason? Can you speak to that general idea, please? Whether you agree
I'm
with it,
not,
I mean, if it makes
I'm
sense
not
or
sure.
you think it's crazy or what.
Oh no, I'm sure that it happened
Mm-hmm.
and continues to happen. Okay. Um, there was an incident on a shuttle mission
Mm-hmm.
that I was involved in, and um, I was on the medical console, and I heard the commander of the shuttle make a comment that the UFO was dead ahead, but in the 3 seconds that, as you know, all TV audio is shifted 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
During that 3 seconds, that little phrase disappeared.
Hmm.
But we were getting direct radio feeds, not television feeds.
Mm-hmm.
We were getting direct radio feeds. And it was like, I didn't hear about it until later, and it's like, oh, okay.
Well,
Okay,
that must be,
the mice have been at play again,
it must
you
be
know.
so frustrating to those of whom are ethical in the space agency, which is the vast majority of the day-to-day workers, and to hear things like this. And we might as well go straight to the Apollo 11 landing. I mean, there are, of course, rumors floating around that as soon as they astronauts stepped onto the surface of the moon, they made a comment that we're being watched. We're being watched from the craters. And Linda Moulton Howe very recently interviewed someone who said that they had heard a direct feed that confirmed exactly that. And there are several now. There are multiple sources saying that that was true. That as soon as Armstrong, wait, it was Armstrong, right? Who stepped? stepped.
Neil.
Yeah,
Neil's
Neil Armstrong. As
step.
soon as they stepped onto the moon, you know, there was an alien presence. And other astronauts, Gordon Cooper and Edgar Mitchell, you know, they have hinted or said outright that basically all the missions were trailed by UFOs or observed or whatever. Can you speak to specifically the Apollo 11 landing, but also in general the ideas that UFOs, whatever their true nature, have been with us throughout the whole thing?
Oh yeah. You know, have you ever met Buzz Aldrin?
I
Okay.
wish I had, but have you?
Oh yes. Oh
I'm
yes.
sure you have.
And I mean, he's got it on video, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He's about, you know, he and Neil are talking about, well, you know, on the way to the moon. And he's going, Neil, what's that? And Neil looks at it and says, oh, that's our booster. You know, anyway, no. We saw the booster an hour ago and it was going the opposite direction. And
That can't happen.
He and Neil just kind of looked at each other and decided to just be quiet. Okay. They wasn't on comms at the time. So mission control didn't hear that little exchange.
Mm.
But Buzz put it on video, you know, later. So I mean you can find that video link episode just about anywhere. But oh yeah, they were followed, they were watched. So
it was really common knowledge.
Say,
really, I mean, anyone who had any insight into the workings of the program, NASA, it sounds like you all must have known that there was stuff going on like this. However, very few people talked. In fact, the astronauts didn't talk for 50 years or something. I mean, really not publicly. What is that just the non-disclosure agreements? Is that the oaths that they take? Why do you think it's so difficult to find people who will really go on the record until very recently, at least?
Okay.
Including yourself.
Right. Let me say this. 1960s was only what? 20 years since World War II? 1970s, only 30 years from World War II?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The whole country during World War II and Korea. Okay. You know, if a government official said, you do not talk about something, you did not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You compartmentalized it, shoved it away, and forget it. Okay. That's not the case today.
No.
I mean, general public is very skeptical today. You know, you mentioned something like what happened on Apollo 17, you know, and they're going to jump all over you, you know. But it was just the mentality back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, those of us on Apollo 17, none of them was on the communication loop. Signed a non-disclosure agreement. It was kind of hard for them to do one for me because I was out on a recovery ship. And but back then you didn't need things like non-disclosure agreements and stuff like that. If you were told, keep your mouth shut, don't talk about it, don't talk to your friends, don't talk to your family, don't talk to anybody.
Mhm.
You didn't. It was simple as that.
Even for
People
decades.
don't understand that today.
Yeah.
People don't understand that mentality that we had back then.
Well, there was a loyalty and allegiance to country that was different decades ago. And that brings up the question, of course, which is why would NASA or any government agency sit on information of such potential importance, even national security importance? And that may be the answer right there. But we talk about why there would be a, cover up, for lack of a better term.
Are you familiar with Dr. Travis Taylor?
I don't think so. Gwen, do you?
No, Travis.
Wow.
Taylor?
Travis
Taylor. Dr.
Taylor.
Travis Taylor.
Oh, Travis Taylor. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Good friend of mine, by the way. We have done some seminars, and we even did an experiment trying to prove that quantum entanglement was a wormhole, but we never succeeded on it. Anyway, he and I had a discussion about this, okay? And we both kind of agreed that, okay, it's in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, even the 80s, it was considered that if we acknowledged that there were ETs out there, that the general population would be so shocked it would collapse civilization as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
But starting in the 90s and going forward, okay, especially with all the TV shows like Ancient Aliens, and some others, all the books, especially now with the U.S. UAP task force and the military saying that, yeah, the Tic Tacs are real and they're not ours. The general population, I don't think would be shocked anymore. And I would think they would be, oh, finally, we're going to meet the aliens.
So does that imply then that there has been a program in place for many decades to condition the American public, or do you think it's just kind of how it's happened? Do you think there's an official policy to bring this stuff out very gently, so like you said, civilization doesn't collapse?
In the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a policy of the U.S. government to debunk UFOs and ETs. If you're familiar with Dr. Hynek,
Mm-hmm.
you will notice that he left the program after the coroner report came out. It's kind of, excuse me, I'm just now getting over that cold.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, summer colds are worse.
Yeah, that's all right. Take your time. So into the 80s, 90s. You think things changed around the when 80s, 90s maybe?
90s.
Yeah.
Um, that's when a lot of what I say the start of the UFO uh, programs, TV programs.
Mm-hmm.
And also the kids of that time uh, grew up starting with the 90s. They grew up with the shows like Ancient Aliens and What's Out There and
Yeah.
you know,
X-Files.
X-Files.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you ask most millennials today, do you believe in UFOs and ET? They'll flat tell you, yes. You know, we're just waiting for them to come land on the White House lawn.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's a totally different mentality now because, um, you know, I would say it started with the millennials, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and they're now of age and they're going, you know, we're not putting up with this malarkey because we know better now, you know. And I think they were probably instrumental in uh, the military finally coming out and was it 2014 saying that the tic tacs they keep running into
Mhm.
are real, and at the same time they don't belong to us. And in fact, I heard a Air Force general the other day mention that yes, they don't belong to us, they don't belong to China, they don't belong to Russia. You know, and that's all he said. I mean that either leaves private enterprise or ET. And I doubt even Elon Musk has that type of technology.
Well, let me,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Well, let me ask one more thing. I'll throw it back to
Okay.
you, Gwen, because I really, this brings up a key issue for me that I grapple with all the time. And I'm hoping JoAnn, I'm sure she's thought about it, and I'm wondering what her opinion is. So if what we're calling the government, NASA and intelligence agencies and whoever's been the CIA, whoever's been participating and molding this long 50-year disclosure process, do you think that there were good intentions from the beginning in terms of we need to really lay this out slowly so we don't get chaos? Or do you think that it was just because it's military minds, you know, crafting these policies, that it was all about suppress, suppress, suppress as long as we possibly can until we can't do it anymore? I mean, which one is more realistic from your perspective?
The second one.
And so
Your
by the
So,
90s or 2000, it just became too hard to keep a lid on everything. And so
Yep.
my next
Well,
question,
you got to look at the look at the court arm report. Okay.
yeah,
Condon
I
report.
mean, oh God,
well,
that
Blue
was a
Book and then
travesty.
Condon, and yeah.
That was such a travesty. And like I
Hmm.
said, Dr. Hynek just threw his hands up and quit the Project Blue Book because
Hynek, yeah. And then he had a
he
cameo in
said,
Close Encounters the Third Kind, which is always fun. That was one of the key movies, at least for my generation, where I really started thinking. I was 8 years old, I think. I really started thinking about ET could be real, and I was Steven Spielberg, right? I mean, media has, you know, played a huge part in how we think about ET, particularly ET, you know, the movie. And so there's been it's obvious there's been a joint venture between government and media. So my last question, I'll let Gwen talk about everything she wants to, because I've got my questions in here, I think. Um, where does it head, though? Is there an end game in play here, or is the government just going to say, okay, we all know about it? Or are they still trying to control the narrative and take it some direction? What do you think, JoAnn?
The government, I mean, kudos to the government. They came out and said, yes, these UAPs, which are the new UFO, they're real. They're not our technology. They're not Russian technology. They're not Chinese technology.
Mm-hmm.
And until one of two things happens, we're not going to see the next paradigm shift. And those two things is, one, either the government discloses everything going back to the 1940s, or ET actually lands on the White House, on the mall at the White House.
Mm-hmm.
Like it did, like in the movie, what was it? What was the name of it? Oh, the old black and white movie.
The Day the Earth Stood
The
Still,
day the earth stood still.
The Day the Earth Stood Still.
probably, or other ones, probably, but that one's the.
Yeah, the Earth Stood Still.
Mhm.
The spacecraft came in and landed on the mall, and unless that happens, or the government just says, okay, yes, they're real, and here's full disclosure going back to the 1940s. One of those two is going to have to happen probably in the next 10 years. Or
So you know what worries me about that, though, is that I think there's a third scenario, and that is that the government says, yes, these things are real. Yes, we've been kind of covering it up for a while. We did it to protect you, and these things are a threat. So we therefore now need to view them as the next new enemy that has superpowers compared to anybody else we've ever fought. Do you think that could happen? And if that happens, how does that change our society, our reality? And are they a threat? That's the other question.
in a sense, yes, they are a threat. They're a threat to our civilizations. They're they're a threat to our morality. I mean, if they tomorrow big mothership came in and a smaller craft came out of the mothership and landed on the mall, right then and there, you have a paradigm shift. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The world as you knew it has just been destroyed. It's a whole new world. And yes, they could be, they're going to be a threat, even if they're malevolent. They're going to be a threat to our economy. They're going to be a threat to our civilization, to our religions, to our way of life, to our technology. The whole, chip in the barrel type deal. So yes, that is what a lot of other people I know believe in, like Travis, is that, even if they're malevolent, they're gonna, change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, even if they don't land on the White House lawn, okay, let's say we detect some huge spacecraft in our asteroid belt, mining our asteroid belt, okay, even that close proximity will cause a paradigm shift. Because first of all, they're here. Number two, they're real, and third is, are they hostile or not? Because they won't come talk to us.
Mhm.
You know, the old scenario about, you know, ET coming here to take our resources is so unrealistic. It is pitiful because there's 10,000 times more resources in the asteroid belt than we have on planet Earth. So,
Yeah.
you know, they have no reason to do something like that. You know, they really don't have any reason to colonize. You know, they would either be, to me, there's one or two scenarios. They're either benevolent or they're warlike, and they're just going to conquer for the sake of conquering. You know, they just want to add us to their empire or whatever. So,
Well, Gwen, go ahead. I've been monopolizing as usual.
Okay, well, we don't want to take too much of JoAnn's time today, but I did want to just.
oh no, take all you want. Take all you want.
Okay, thank you. I did, Dave, you asked a couple of my questions already,
Okay.
so that's terrific. So I don't need to throw those in. One of the things that I wanted to kind of take off what we have just been talking about with JoAnn is, do you think, and I'm assuming that you don't have any deep ties with the government, the black government or anything like that, like neither Dave or I have. I don't think Dave has. I don't have.
No.
But just for someone who has been involved in these important things for so many years, do you think that the United States government, and we're just going to go with the US, not with the other part of the world, is in, I don't want to use the word cahoots, but is in communication with beings from other worlds? And the United States government is kind of, they're trying to sort of work together in some way. And I don't really even know how to go. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense to me. I would say Travis and I talked about this one time. And what we came up with was that, yes, we both feel that the US government has had captured or rescued ETs from crash landings or shoot downs, one of the two. We feel that for many years, they had to keep this on the wraps because a threat of a intergalactic war. Okay, I mean, you just don't capture somebody else's people,
Yeah.
okay, without not acknowledging it. And if you don't acknowledging it, that's a hostile attitude. Okay. We both feel that they eventually contacted the ETs and says, yes, we have some of your people. We have some remains because we didn't know what to film, et cetera, because we didn't know. It'd be like a brand new discovering a brand new animal and then trying to figure out how to keep it alive in a zoo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we feel that we're way past that point. That you may say bad feelings have been smoothed over between us and the ETs, and we feel that both Russia and China have done the same thing, that they have, because nobody wants an intergalactic war. Come on, basically, I mean, if they're 300 years ahead of us, even 200 years ahead of us, we're going to come out on the wrong end of the stick.
Right.
Mhm.
So, so it would behoove that if we had recovered live aliens, and etc., to quietly contact their governments and say, hey, we're willing to meet somewhere, give you your people, just don't destroy us,
Right.
So,
Hey, and you think that has actually been done?
oh yes, yeah.
Interesting.
And I think as a result of that, we have we're given the opportunity to re-engineer their crafts and stuff, and use whatever we could re-engineer or whatever, and move it into the private sector and stuff. As long as we didn't say where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, since you've spoken to Travis and you guys are good buddies and you share a lot of things that you think, he is possibly has access to knowledge that you don't have, or vice versa, because of the work that he's done and in the science, more currently, perhaps more recently. And so I'm very intrigued.
He was chief scientist of the U.S. UAP task force, okay, for what, almost 3 years? And I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it. And but after he came out and said that, yes, he was part of the task force, I got thinking, and I went back and looked at a particular episode of Skinwalker Ranch and watched his body language.
Oh.
And I went, that's when he decided to contact the Pentagon.
Interesting.
Okay? He saw something that worried him enough, didn't scare him, just worried him enough that he needed to report it, and ended up being on the UAP task force. So
wow. So interesting. Yeah, he is. He's an amazing person. So, well, I guess we're about out of time today. But before we do close, I'd like to ask you, JoAnn, if you have a website that you'd like to share with our viewers, if you want to just tell us what it is, and so people can contact you.
No website. I do have an email that they can contact me at.
Okay.
And it's JoAnnPlano2005 at yahoo.com.
Okay, so JoAnnPlano2005 at Gmail.
No, Yahoo.
Okay. Oh, Yahoo. I'm sorry, at yahoo.com. Okay, great. Well, it has been a great pleasure to have you with us today. And one thing that we usually ask at the end of our interviews is, Dave kind of brought this up before, but I want to just narrow it down a little bit. And that is, looking at history throughout your life and what's been going on in our world, are you optimistic about where the human race is going and where our Earth is going? Or do you have some concerns, serious concerns, and things that we should really be maybe changing our course on?
I think we're getting better. we did go through a very serious time in the 60s and 70s. There was a very much daily threat of nuclear war during those 2 decades. I think that all the major governments have, realized that, we can't do that. But at the same time, we're still going to keep our nuclear forces. But I think the probability of a global nuclear war is pretty much past now. And because technology has advanced so quickly, especially in the last 30 years, that it's getting harder and harder to keep secrets. But at the same time, it's getting so easier and easier to fabricate things.
Okay, well, we're coming near the end here, probably have a half hour or so left, JoAnn. We don't want to keep you too long, but there's so many questions to ask. I'd like to go back to earlier missions, though, because I still have some lingering questions. And you may have heard, you may be familiar with the discovery, apparently, of old lunar images, NASA images at a McDonald's. At least that's how it's been sensationalized in the news. As far as I understand, it was a kind of a temporary repository of imagery at an old abandoned McDonald's. And there's been a big effort to compile those images and enhance them and preserve them for the record. But it seems to be a very weird trend to me that a lot of the imagery from this momentous occasion has kind of been discarded and tossed off and forgotten about. And the incident I'm speaking about specifically, other than that McDonald's thing, which is a bizarre story if you go Google it and read it, is Ken Johnston was the photo documentation supervisor and astronaut trainer for Apollo 14. He held a lot of imagery in his personal collection, but the only reason he held that, in fact, the way he tells the story, it was against orders. He was ordered by his supervisor to discard, to literally throw these images into the dumpster behind Johnson Space Center, wherever he was. And he couldn't do that. And so he took his own sample and he hoarded them for several decades. So my question is, why was there that attitude? Can you understand that attitude of let's just discard or forget about these images unless there was a reason to suppress them? And also, do you have images yourself that you've been able to keep over the years?
Well, I've got a few that I took on Apollo 17 that nobody else has, not even NASA. But the general mindset was that all of these missions were recorded on 2-inch magnetic tape. And they were like 14 to 18-inch reels. But they only had a certain number of these things. So this is why a lot of the Apollo 11 imagery was lost, was because those particular reels were reused on like Apollo 14 or 15. And it didn't dawn on anyone at the time. Maybe we should, set Apollo 11 reels aside and not touch them. Okay. But, it was common practice to reuse stuff like that.
Mhm. It just
And
seems like it was such, even at the time, I mean, looking back 40, 50 years, it has proven to be even more uh, an even more incredible accomplishment, considering that we never went back to the moon, after your last mission there, Apollo 17. I think all the astronauts and everyone involved, the scientists, were anticipating that we would go back, we would build a city on the moon, or laboratories. We would go on to Mars and have humans on Mars. And here we are, a half a century later, none of that happened. And so that early imagery that seems like it would be enshrined in an archive somewhere, as one of mankind's greatest accomplishments, kind of has fallen by the wayside in a lot of ways. And it's sad today, looking in hindsight. But I do understand at the time maybe the attitude was different. Although Ken Johnston, like I said, his superior just said, just throw it away. He didn't say, oh, we need to use let's recycle or whatever. He said, just get rid of it, dump it, Ken. And Ken couldn't understand the rationale behind that.
well, archiving it, like at Johnson Space Center, only had a certain amount of space.
Yeah, that's true too.
Okay, yeah. Now, later on, I think it was in the late 90s, maybe. There was a group, got together, formed a special group, and
Mhm.
their task was to go back and see if they could find from the archives enough footage of Apollo 17 on various reels to make up a video footage of the Apollo 17 landing.
Mhm.
And they were able to find enough bits and pieces of imagery on, like on the front end of a reel or back end of a reel or something like that, where they were able to splice it together and get the actual video image of the Apollo 17 landing, and Neil Armstrong stepping out on the surface of the moon.
Mhm.
Now, what they then had to do was put it through a scan converter so that it could be recorded and everybody could see it, watch it, because the recording video that NASA was using for the moon missions was not NTSC.
Mhm.
Was not your standard TV 512 lines type video. It was 312 lines, 30 frames per second. I
Mhm.
mean, it was considered slow scan television. It was barely enough imagery that your eyes would not detect any blurring as they moved.
Mhm.
But yet the bandwidth was small enough that they didn't have to have a huge transmitter on the limb.
Yeah, to be
So,
fair, obviously the technology 4 or 5 decades ago was vastly different than what we have today. And
it was
that,
all analog.
yeah, and
It
it
was
had to
all
be
analog, no digital,
manually spliced. And I
Oh yeah,
mean,
all that stuff.
you couldn't enhance, it was literally film in most cases. And then
That's another thing that group did, was they
Mhm.
got hold of the actual film cameras
Mhm.
footage, the Hasselblad film camera footage,
Right.
of that were taken and they use that also as part of the Apollo 11 reel. So
So given,
it took them a lot of time and work to get it.
yeah, of course, yeah, it was very
But now
late.
you can get a DVD. I understand you can. I don't know where you get it, but I understand you can get a DVD of that reconstructed.
So that brings me to part two. You've segued perfectly into part two, and that is that we have different nations. India just landed last week. Russia unfortunately encountered difficulties. There's still not clear what happened there, but it's been pretty tough to land on the moon. I mean, it's only been 4 nations, right? At this point, China joined the US and Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, and India, like I said, last week or two. Now, the imagery that we have from the moon from recent years, I think, pales in comparison even to the years that you're familiar with, that you were involved. And I've been watching the India mission with great interest, waiting for all these fantastic high-res images to come in. And when you look at the images, I think there's like 1 that's available. And then they show some footage from the craft itself, and it's like 1990 resolution. I mean, it's dark ages, and I just wonder, why can we not get some real super high resolution imagery, video? We should have video, but if not video, at least images. And it's been very difficult to find images from China. From Japan has had an orbiter, right? And the US has sent several missions. I know they sent a Pentagon mission, Department of Defense in Clementine, and those images are garbage from what I've seen. I mean, useless for any analysis, at least the ones that are publicly available. And I just want to know, as an insider, why do you think that we have such crappy images coming out? We've got thousands or millions of them, especially from the DoD mission, and yet we don't see anything that could really help us, pinpoint
you said the
areas on the
word.
moon.
You said the magic word, DoD.
Yeah. Well, so
Okay.
so why did they go and just image the heck out of the moon? I think they got like a million images or something. We don't get to see any of those, right? Or nothing that's high resolution.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to see anything out of the DoD, it's going to be low resolution. It's not going to be high resolution.
Why does why does the Pentagon or the DoD need to go image the heck out of the moon? They took like 1 million pictures of the moon. What are they using that for, unless there's something there that's of great interest to the military industrial complex?
I'm not sure about the moon, but if you look at a lot of the images that's coming off of the Mars rover, I mean, they're super sharp, high res.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so NASA's doing high res, but not DoD.
Yeah, well,
That just shows the difference.
It's odd that in this day and age of super high, a lot of disk space is very cheap now relative to past.
Like you said, you would expect India to be using high res. I mean, they're a high tech civilization. Shoot, they're a high tech. They're just as high tech as we are.
Oh yeah.
And
so anyway, I don't want to get us off track here. We want to move to the Cash-Landrum case, and we want to kind of talk about UFOs a little bit. But I just want to put that out there. That what's that?
You want to do Cash-Landrum? You want to do Cash-Landrum first, or you want to do Apollo 17 first?
Well, no. Let's stick with the moon definitely, and
okay.
You can tell us everything you want to about Apollo 17, because you were there, and this was what, 1972.
1972, fall of 1972, because we got back to U.S. shores just before Christmas. So
Mhm.
November 1972. To start off with, everything, this was Apollo 17 was the last moon mission. Okay. So when we got on board the recovery ship, the two flight controllers said, you know, after about monitoring for 2 or 3 days, said, anybody else want to monitor, you can always have one of the Marine Guards come get us if anything happens, And I
So
went,
this
sure.
was in the ship was, just give us an idea of where you were.
We're in the South Pacific,
And so you
cruising
were
around
on the
the
recovery
Pacific.
ship. You
Recovery
were
ship.
on the
on
ship
the recovery
itself,
ship. Yeah,
which is-
yeah.
How many people got to be involved in that effort?
Oh God, there were probably, if you count NASA and DOD.
Well, I mean, in that specific, on the ship, in that particular recovery effort, I mean,
Um,
how did you get a seat on the ship is my question.
well, I was on the pre-flight and recovery team, so medical. So, I'm still interfacing with, my job was to interface with the crews when they got back.
Mm-hmm.
Do things like babysit them the first couple of nights so that while they readjusted to gravity and stuff like that.
Wow, that's an important job.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so I went, hey, I'll volunteer to be a control, monitor controls. So my slot was 12 o'clock midnight to 5 o'clock in the morning, which corresponded to about 12 o'clock noon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon Houston time. We were just about 12 hours difference out in the middle of the South Pacific. So I'm sitting there, and I'd gotten 2 or 3 of these sessions because we were out there for 3 or 4 weeks straight. We were out there before they even launched. So it was fun. I mean, so I'd already done 2 or 3 of these midnight sessions. And basically it was sitting there watching their EKG and watching their respiration and listening to them and things like that. And the first highlight we had was, well, EVA 1 and Harrison, they get back in the limb, and Harrison Schmidt takes off his helmet and immediately starts choking up, and his eyes start running, and he's having a severe allergy attack. Well, we very quickly realized that, okay, Jack, you are allergic to moon dust.
Moon dust.
And that's fine, you're having an allergy attack.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with a solution for that, and that was hitting real hard with antihistamines and stick his helmet back over his head and let him breathe the pure oxygen coming off his suit. And that cleared him up, and it was fine. So that's what he had to do on the next 2 EVAs when they get back in the limb was, take his antihistamines, put his keep his helmet on while Gene vacuumed up the limb. Used the device they used for urine collection and used it to vacuum up the limb and vacuum it up so that he could take his helmet off and get some sleep. So, got through that crisis.
Gene Cernan.
Right.
and Harrison Schmidt, and then was there another? There was another, right?
Yeah, yeah. You had Ron Evans, and he was up in the
And Evans. Okay, okay.
yeah. You had Ron Evans. He was up in the mothership, circling the moon. So everything got cool. Then on day EVA number 2, which was the next day, about midway through the EVA, Ron Evans comes back around from his 2-hour orbit around the moon, comes back in, checks in with Houston. And about that time, Gene jokingly comes up on the air and says, hey, Ron, not getting lonely, are you? And Ron went, no, I'm not lonely. I got company. Well, I can imagine you probably hear a pin drop in Mission Control. And because I was sitting there reading a paperback, and all of a sudden, with my feet propped up, and I, pulled my feet off the counter and just stared at the console like, what was that? Well, Chris Kraft and his ultimate wisdom, you know who that is?
Chris Kraft.
Chris Kraft. Yeah. He was in charge of the Mission Control, and he goes, Harrison, why don't you switch over to the medical channel? So, and this was like, okay, to at least to the public, well, they're checking on Harrison and see how he's doing. And so we switch over to the medical channel, and Chris Kraft goes, Harrison, get up and tell Ron to come over here, and then you go back to the record channel. So he got Ron on the channel, and he went back to the regular channel. And the first thing Chris Kraft wanted to know was, guys, are y'all joking? And Ron went, what joke are you talking about? And Kraft goes, the joke about you having company. And he goes, oh, you mean the craft that's in formation with me.
So you heard this on the medical channel, which is the encrypted non-public channel. There were at least 2 streams, right?
We had 2 non-public encrypted channels.
Well, you had 2 separate channels, and then the public, or just 2?
Well, you had the public channel, and then you had the encrypted medical channel, and then you had the encrypted maintenance channel.
Oh, so there were actually 3 at least.
Yeah. So Kraft goes, Ron, say that again. He goes, I got this Kraft in formation with me. And, and so by this time, I'm really sitting there staring at the console, going, thinking, what the hell is going on?
Okay, so JoAnn, let me just say, did you have a clearance at this time? You must have had a clearance, right?
Oh yeah, we all had clearances.
What is it, a certain level clearance, or is it just anyone who's involved in the project at any level? I mean, did you have a higher clearance than others that would allow you to listen in on this obviously very
if you're
shocking...
on the pre-flight and recovery team, you have a lot higher clearance than you did if you were, sitting in the what we call the MOCA, the Mission Control Center, watching a console there, the the console. I was watching the, the electrical stuff and everything, you know.
And so are you allowed to be telling
His, huh?
us?
Well, the thing is that, come on, it's been what, 50, 60 years?
Well, I just wonder if there's a specific time, timeline
Usually,
that you sign,
well, if you look at DoD regulations, 30 years is max for any kind of security, and after that,
Mhm.
it becomes public domain after 30 years.
Okay, well, please continue. I'm sorry I keep interrupting
That's
because I
okay.
just want to make sure what you're saying here, because this is
So,
something I haven't heard before.
so then Kraft goes, it was fun. He goes, medical, were you concurrence here? Basically, what he's asking me is Ron Evans lying
Mm.
or making a, doing it? Is he lying? Or does him and G. Suring have this running joke going on? Or is he, saying the truth? And I came back, I keyed up and went, far as I could tell, he's, I'm in concurrence. And so Kraft, got that kind of tells Kraft, okay, we have a situation here. And so next thing was that Ron, we need to have a little powwow here. So if just monitor your situation here, and we'll get back to you after we have our little powwow, because we had no contingency plans for this. There were no contingency plans for this type of scenario. So, so I decided I better tell one of the Marine Guards to go get Dr. Bergman, because he really needs to be here. I'm not supposed to be on this console, really. He's the one that's supposed to be here, so he's the one that's got to take the heat. So I got up and went over and opened the door and told one of the Marine Guards, I says, go get Dr. Bergman, get him here, stat. And he takes off running. And then it was about 15 minutes, and Dr. Bergman walks in and he goes, we got a medical emergency? I says, no, but you need to be here. We don't have a medical emergency, but we have something going on with Ron, but you need to be here, because remember, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm only doing this so you could get some sleep. So it was, so
it sounds like you felt pretty uncomfortable at that point, because this was a true anomaly. I mean,
yeah,
you didn't expect this at all, even though some of the past missions there are accounts that similar occurrences.
Yeah, but no one really, I don't want to say took it non-seriously. They took everything the crew said seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But, in the planning stages and stuff, no one conceived of some kind of contact, and if we have some kind of contact, what do we do? So anyway, that's why Chris had to have this little powwow, because he had to contact NASA headquarters. he had to get his advisors together and say, okay, inform him what's going on, and say, what do we do? You know, what do we have Ron do? So I brought Dr. Bergman up to speed, and he goes, what? Are you serious? I says, hey, I don't know if it's, if they're joking, for us I know they're not joking. Ron's up there with some kind of crap, in formation with him. And he goes, and Dr. Bergman goes, okay. I says, want me to leave? He goes, oh, no, you're not leaving. We're in this together.
So now I have to ask, did Apollo 17 did the astronauts have camera, like the Hasselblad cameras still? So Evans could have taken some pictures of this thing, right?
I ain't got to that yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping.
You're getting ahead of my story, Dave.
You got me on the edge of my seat, though.
Getting too excited here.
I will mute myself. Please continue. Go ahead.
So finally, Kraft comes back on the medical channel and goes, okay, Ron, he goes, here's what we want you to do. Take still pictures of it. Try to get the entire craft if possible. Take movies of it. And again, get much of the craft as you can. And look for any acrylic lettering. Because the first thought was that, okay, this is a Russian craft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, which kind of made sense because Russia was also flying in space. So, they could have launched something to the moon, because back then, whenever Russia did something in space, you didn't know about it until after it was pretty much done.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't tell you as it was happening. So anyway, so Ron is taking pictures and he's writing notes and he's doing drawings, and he goes, Houston, far as I can tell, there's no acrylic writing on this craft. There is some kind of writing, if you call it that, but he goes, I don't know if it's writing or not, but he goes, there's no distinguishable marks, such as, rocket nozzles or antenna or even a hatch, some kind of hatch or whatever. He goes, it's just a big, long, oblong object that's, sitting out there, traveling along the same speed I am around the moon. Ron's being really, really cool at this. He's.
I guess.
You
heard that?
He's not getting all excited and everything is like, oh, okay. Well, let's see. Let's look at the nose of this thing. Okay, let's look at the midset.
So JoAnn, I just want to. You were privy. You listened to this part of the transmission, or
the whole thing for the whole for the next 14 hours. In fact, it came time for shift change, and Ron told the other controller, "Go away. We got a situation here. Go away until we get it resolved." because this craft was in orbit with him for 4.5 orbits. And 2-hour orbits means about 8 hours or so. When this didn't start until about 3 o'clock in the morning. So it was 3 hours into the ship when this all happened. So for the next for the next 10 hours, you know, we were sitting there listening to all this, you know.
Wow.
And Dr. Bergman and I are looking at each other like, holy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
crap, you know.
Well,
And
who wouldn't? Who
he,
wouldn't
yeah,
think that?
he's looking at me and he's like, he goes, is this real? And I'm like, evidently, because I mean, you know, I says, you know the cruise just as well as I do. You think Ron's making this up? And he goes, no, Ron's not the type that's going to make up something like this, you know. So, and then all of a sudden Ron goes, it's leaving. It's started to peel off and it's leaving, and oh, there it goes. And somebody came on and says, well, how fast? What do you mean? How fast was? There you go. He goes, well, one moment it was big, and next moment it's a pinprick, and probably in between 3 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, which means that thing was moving fast.
Mhm.
It broke it broke orbit and went, you know, went somewhere. So
Wow.
we had our little wrap up, and then
Well, what do you mean by wrap up? I mean, this is usually in the movie, this is where the men in black enter the room and escort you out and, you know,
well, we had a little
tie
wrap
you
up.
to a
Okay, you
a
know,
wall or something, a chair.
let's keep monitoring in case it comes back. Well, after a couple more hours, it was fairly evident it wasn't coming back. So we went, okay, let's switch over and you know, continue the mission. And Ron, pack all your notes and stuff away, and then just act like nothing happened.
Mm.
Ron went, oh, okay. And so we went back to the mission, and by this time, it was like a couple of hours, you know, past ship time. And so Dr. Berman says, oh, he goes, looks at me and goes, go get Dr. Nigagosian and tell him he's on the console. And he goes, I says, and I looked at him, I says, do we say anything about this? And he goes, I wouldn't right now unless Mission Control says something. Well, the next day, I get this Marine comes up to me and says, you're wanted in the in your control room. I went, okay. So I get up and go down to the control room, and here's Dr. Bergman. And I looked at him and says, what's up? He goes, NASA wants to have a little conference call. Well, the assistant director of NASA comes on the line, on the radio, and he goes, gentlemen and ladies, we had a situation yesterday, And we're still evaluating this whole thing, but we want you to not talk about this to anybody. Your coworkers, your family, your wives, your husbands, nobody. Don't talk about it. And we all got on the rails as basically, okay, or we confirm. And then he was, okay, all right, back to the mission. And that was it. And then you got to remember the time frame of 1972. Okay. It wasn't that long since Korea and World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So the mind frame was still, if the government says don't talk about something, you didn't need a NDA. You didn't talk about it.
Just didn't do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you didn't need a non-disclosure agreement. You just didn't talk about it, because they knew who they had your name.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you start talking about it, they would come and make sure you didn't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sure it was well understood what you were expected to do or not do in that case. And of course, it's very understandable to those of us who hear these accounts, and I consider this to be one of the most amazing accounts I've ever heard on any of this stuff.
Yes.
It's a first-hand account of not just some lights in the sky somewhere, but a day-long adventure contact with someone else, something else that had multiple witnesses. So my question now is Dr. Bergman still with us? Or some of these people that
no. Dr. Bergman is
Evans?
Dr. Bergman was in his late 40s.
So this was literally 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I think he passed away in 2009. Most of these, all but all of the Apollo 17 crew have passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people that were privy to the loop, there's probably maybe 2 or 3 others that are still alive.
Yeah.
And I have no idea who they are or where they live. Type deal.
Secrets die, secrets die when people die, unfortunately. It's still...
Well, like I said, 30 years is the general time limit for most classified things that are classified, 30 years. So, which is why when I ran into the narrator of Ancient Aliens, shoot, got his name now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember.
Hang on.
Yeah, I could listen to this account all day, because this is what my personal interest is in NASA and the moon and our space missions and all that. I know that Gwen wanted to get into Cash-Landrum. If you still have time, Gwen, and of course JoAnn, if you can stick around. Sure. This is going to be a long show. It may even be 2 shows, but I don't care. It's amazing, the stuff that you're sharing with us today. So I would love to go into Cash-Landrum also, if you two... I know Gwen has lots of other obligations, but if you're ready to go into that, let's...
Well, let me, real quick...
Let her finish.
Wrap it up, sure.
Yeah. I ran into one of the narrator for Ancient Aliens at a sci-fi con held here in Dallas. And he asked me if there was anything, I told him I was an old Apollo engineer. And he asked me if there was anything that, the show might be interested in. And he said he got a little scared because I just stood there and stared at him. And I don't realize I was staring at him because what I was doing was thinking to myself, should I tell him or should I not? Finally, I says, you got an extra chair folding chair back there? Because what I'm going to tell you is going to take a little while, and I'd rather do it sitting down. So I told him all about Apollo 17, and as I was telling him about it, his eyes kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we ended up exchanging contact information and stuff. He went back to the studio. 2 months later, the studio contacted me and wanted to do a big spread on one of the episodes about it. So that's how I got on Ancient Aliens.
Interesting.
As for Cash-Landrum,
Yep.
I got involved in that because of Apollo 17. Because, when we don't know, I don't know who it was. It was some Congress person, congressman or senator. I don't know when. Which, anyway, wanted NASA to test these 2 women for radiation poisoning, and so evidently someone remembered that, I was involved in Apollo 17 anomaly, which is what NASA called UFOs, anomalies. And she works in radiation experiments, so she should be a good person to work with Dr. Thornton on this. So we took the 2 ladies and we took them down to the radiation lab, which is underneath Building 7 at JSC. There's 4 stories in the ground. And this is to block out as much cosmic rays as possible. The entire structure down there was made out of steel that was made before World War II, because everything after World War II is a higher radiation count because of all the above ground nuclear tests all over the world. So we took them down there and we ran some tests on them. And our conclusion was, yes, these 2 had radiation poisoning. One of them had more so than the other. And it turned out, I don't remember which one walked up closer to the craft or not, but she had more radiation poisoning than the one that stayed by the car. And so, the conclusion, yes, they had radiation poisoning. An interesting side note was, while we were doing this, one of our staff geologists came up to us, had got wind of this. Things are, places like NASA, something going on like this, it gets, goes all over the site. But anyway, one of our staff geologists came up and says, do you think I could talk to these ladies and find out where they were at in East Texas? And we went, I don't see why not. So he went and asked them where it was at. And then I didn't see him for probably 6-8 weeks later. And I ran into him in the cafeteria. And I says, Doc, did you ever go out and check out where the 2 ladies were at? He goes, oh yeah, we went out. I said, well, what did you find? He goes, nothing.
Nothing.
I says, what do you mean nothing? He goes, there was nothing to test. He says, we got out there and a 12-foot section of the highway had been completely replaced. including the dirt on both sides, down 3 feet. He said, there's nothing to test. And he goes, and we knew it was brand new because we tested the dirt and the concrete on both sides, and it was older. It tested out older than the concrete and the dirt did in that 12-foot section. I says, well, that's kind of unusual in itself, that section of the road was replaced.
Mhm.
He goes, yeah. He says, I checked with the state highway department, Texas State Highway Department, and the county. I think it was Novato County. I don't remember which county. But anyway, both the state of Texas and the county have road departments where they go out and maintain roads. Depending on if it's an interstate or Florida Market Road or county road or whatever. And neither the state or the county had any work order to go out and replace a 12-foot section of that county highway. So whoever replaced that 12-foot section was, a mystery. And so, that just kind of added to the story, to the Cash-Landrum story, because something happened on that 12-foot section, and somebody or some entity came in, ripped out that highway, dug up the dirt, and replaced it all so that there would be no residue left.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, that's kind of strange. But I don't think that particular scenario with the geologist has ever been published anywhere.
Mm-mm.
I don't think it's part of the Cash-Landrum,
Yeah,
history.
that's yeah, that's right. Just for our
I
viewers,
guess
who,
it should,
Go ahead.
I don't know who to contact to add that section, that happening or whatever to it. I don't know who to contact to add it to get it on the official record for
Mhm.
that particular,
yeah, that I
your-
haven't heard that. And I want to just mention for our viewers who may not recall Cash-Landrum incident, you mentioned 2 ladies that were involved. There was also a young child, a 6-year-old, and it happened in East Texas in 1980. And it's called Cash-Landrum because the adults were Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum. And I believe Vicki Landrum is the one who had the more serious injuries. And they were shortly there. Yeah,
she's the
they
one.
were.
Yeah.
They were found to be severe radiation burns on both of them over time, and even the child, but his was not as bad, I understand, as the others were.
I got to meet the boy years later at one of the alien cons, and I was in the green room, and he walks in and he introduces himself, and I went, "Oh," he says, "Oh, you're I think it was Vicky's son." And I
Yes,
says, "You're Vicky's, you're Vicky's son," and and he goes, "Oh, you met my mother?" I says, "Yeah, I met your mother." I says, "I was one of the scientists that tested them at the Johnson Space Center." And he goes, "Wow." He goes, "That's awesome," because I didn't, I knew they were tested, but boy, to meet one of the scientists to test them, that was, he goes, "Thank you for testing them, testing my mother and stuff." And I says, "How did your mother flare after that?" And he goes, "Well, she passed away from cancer." And I says, "Yeah, that's probably a given from her exposure, she was going to probably end up coming down with, severe cancer and probably, he goes, yeah, she passed away from it. And he goes, Aunt, what was the lady? The other lady was his aunt.
Betty?
The other lady, Betty. And he says, yeah, Aunt Betty also passed away from cancer, with cancer. And I says, well, sorry to hear both of that. I says, Dr. Thornton and I both realized that, they were going to probably end up with cancer. And he goes, who's Dr. Thornton? And I says, oh, he's the other scientist. He was the chief scientist doing the tests, and I was mainly his assistant. And he goes, oh, okay. And he goes, is there any way that I could thank Dr. Thornton? I says, no, Dr. Thornton passed away in 1992. And he goes, oh, okay. I says, I'm the only one, probably the only one left. In fact, I am the only one left on that for that particular team. So that's basically it. And
Well, that's really interesting to hear, to add that on, because Cash-Landrum is still rather controversial among some people. And so to hear you say that, which just, adds more validity to it and more interest to it. So we thank you so much for sharing today with us. And it's been a terrific time. And we would love to maybe have you come back sometime in the future, talk a little bit more if you'd like. We'll be in contact with you for that. And I think, David, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we close?
Wow. Other than just thank you so much, JoAnn. I mean, you are the last woman standing in some of these cases, and I appreciate it so much that you're sharing these things. And I want just to kind of sew up the Cash-Landrum thing. How did you get involved? You were a JSC, Johnson Space Center, but since when was NASA in the business of doing UFO investigation? I mean, how does that come about?
Technically, back then, NASA did not do UFO investigations, but they would investigate an anomaly. Okay?
Okay.
An anomaly is not necessarily a UFO. Okay.
Well, true. But
as far as the Cash-Landrum deal, this was kind of forced onto NASA by, like I said, some congressperson.
Okay.
And so, it was okay. Let's test the two women and please this congressperson.
I see.
And
okay, that becomes clearer that somebody, his constituency.
After Dr. Thornton and I wrote up our, response, our from the tests and everything, then one of the NASA ministers just kind of went, well, that's not what we were expecting, but, and I says, well, science is science.
Yeah. True enough.
You either prove it true, you prove it wrong. And here we proved that they both had radiation poisoning. And so it was like, everybody was just going, well, okay. And it's like, I don't know what we, the kind of, I got the impression it was like, I don't know, like, what do we do with this data?
Yeah.
And I went, I don't know. So we just, put it in the archives along with everything else we did. So.
Okay, well, thank you.
These are two amazing accounts. Yeah,
Yes,
I think we're out of time here, but We certainly would love to have you come back, JoAnn, and you've got a lot of insider knowledge for sure. It's a pleasure to hear you share some of these things with us.
Yes, thank you
And
so
I'd like
much.
to have you back. Yeah.
Yes, we would
Yeah,
love that.
we had,
We'll stay in
we,
contact. And
yeah, we had some real we had some all my career we had some doozies of things going wrong, you might say. You
I
know,
bet.
because we primarily, believe it or not, we dealt with human subjects, not animals, human subjects in in most of our experiments. And sometimes those experiments were supposed to be done on the astronauts and they went really wrong. And it was like, no, we're not going to do this to astronauts.
Oh, well, that sounds like a whole other show here, JoAnn.
Yeah,
That's a
we need to
cliffhanger for us.
we need to
It's like,
talk
whoa,
about that.
no, let's don't do this to the astronauts. No. So yeah. Anyway,
Super.
I guess that's it.
Well, thank you very much. We definitely have something to look forward to now. Some more information that's coming out. And we do appreciate you so much, JoAnn, for what you've done in your life for science and for our country and to help your fellow man. So we're going to say goodbye now from Anomalies to all our viewers and say thank you. And we will see you again, hopefully soon. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.